And I know that the sex scene, let's call it, when it fades to black and it's just Phoenix and Johansson's voice orgasming, I don't really mind that. It was a little awkward sitting there in the theater with a bunch of people because I think some were completely like, this is so weird. And it is. I don't think it's meant to be totally normal.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Samantha. Good morning, Theodore.
Good morning.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the FilmBudsPodcast. This is episode number 583, and my name is Henry. This time around, I'm going to be tackling movies dealing with artificial intelligence, which is a very wide spectrum, but this collection includes I, Robot, Her, Transcendence, Ex Machina, Ghost in the Shell, Alita Battle Angel, and Finch. So I think a decent spread, different kinds of films dealing with that subject. As always, please rate, review, subscribe, like, follow, watch us on YouTube if you are not there already. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into it. So take a listen. Let's get to the first film, I, Robot, from 2004. Directed by Alex Proyas, stars Will Smith, Bridget Monahan, Bruce Greenwood, Alan Tudyk, Shia LaBeouf, James Cromwell. And the synopsis is, in 2035, a technophobic cop investigates a crime that may have been perpetrated by a robot, which leads to a larger threat to humanity. This was, I'd say, around the peak of Will Smith's career, where he was just killing it left and right. And I mean, really, the 2000s was peak Will Smith. Alex Proyas had also done already The Crow and Dark City, a very underrated director. I wish he would get back into filmmaking because I think he has a very unique vision, but he's not very prolific. I think his last movie was Gods of Egypt, which is unfortunate. Some just sporadic notes that I love: the design of the robots, the newer robots, and also the older versions who are more colorful and a little bit lankier and awkward, whereas the new ones, they have that milky white skeleton to them, and there's just something so memorable, unique, and a simple yet really effective design, and that immediately stuck out to me, and I feel like I always know that silhouette. The idea of this movie taking place around a murder that seems to be done by a robot, that's very creative, and it's done where I'm always really caring about finding out what's next, who did it, and that whole narrative of the mystery is very compelling. One aspect of the film that honestly makes it what it is in terms of being more emotionally gripping and you really feeling for Will Smith is the backstory of why he hates robots. Because when you first meet him, he's this grumpy cop who he doesn't want anything to do with robots. He doesn't trust them. And you're like, okay, what's the deal here? Like, I get, hey, if you just don't trust technology, there's plenty of people out there who feel the same way. But he's almost overly distrustful where there has to be something else underneath. It's largely because of Will Smith's performance in that one scene where he's telling the story to the female doctor about what happened, and just if you need a refresher or if you haven't seen it, he was in a car crash. There was a young girl in the other car, and they both went over the side of a bridge or a highway and crashed into a body of water of some kind, and they're both sinking. Then a robot saw it, jumped in, and saved Will Smith rather than the teenage girl, because he was, quote-unquote, the logical choice of who would survive. I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically goes on to say that was someone's baby. The percentage of life that she had to possibly survive should be more than enough to have gone for her first, rather than me. He ends off by saying a human being would have known that. And that's so true, because if I jump into, or, if I see a wreck, especially if it's in water or something, I jump in and I see a seemingly healthy adult male, and then I see a early teenage girl trapped in another car, I'm going to go for that girl first in almost every situation. Because I would think, as a human, the adult has a much better chance of breaking out of that car and swimming to safety on his own than would the girl. Whereas a robot would not think that, unless they had some sort of particular programming. That motivation for him, that trauma, let's call it, there's not really, I can never really think of but it's like, immediately I'm thinking, all right, I'm with you. Robots suck. Screw them. I want to follow your path. Let's take him down. Action-wise, movie is good, and there are a few effects, especially the bigger things like explosions and stuff that don't look amazing at this point, but that doesn't really bother me, having seen it when it first came out and the kind of movie that it is. The highway tunnel where Will Smith is driving, like, it's really an iconic sequence, and there's a lot of them in the movie. This huge robot carrier suddenly turns on him, and they all start jumping at his car, and he's going at a super high speed, and then he crashes. One of them survives, fights him for a little bit, but then when the cops show up, the robot runs away, and nobody believes him. The scene when Will Smith is looking for Sonny, the robot, in that line of robots, like a formation, he tricks him by looking like he's going to pull the trigger, like just a little bit, and then you see Sonny dodge the bullet, or dodge what would be the bullet, very quickly, and he's like, all right, I got you. The destruction robot, when Will Smith is at the scientist's house, and the bad guys in the movie had designed or programmed the robot to do the destruction early, so then Will Smith gets trapped in there and has to try and escape while the house is being destroyed. Not that she's bad. I think one of the only weak links is Bridget Moynihan, if I'm saying that right. The character is just a little flat, and her performance doesn't really, she doesn't do what Will Smith does and really elevating it. She's just kind of there. So while I don't really mind spending time with her, especially since she's usually with either Will Smith or Sonny, it's not that big a deal. And another thing that holds up very well is the humor. Just very off-the-cuff, fun humor that I could see these people saying or injecting into these conversations. Everything to do with Sonny's dream, that's so fascinating in how it's presented, and there's the group of robots looking up at this, I guess it's a bridge or something, but all that sketching and alluding to what it might be and them trying to figure it out. Also, Shia LaBeouf, this was really, I guess, around the time he was in Holes, and then he would go on to be in Transformers and Indiana Jones. I don't really mind him in this most of the time. Maybe it's a little too at 11 out of 10. He's just always yelling and cursing, but I think there's humor there. One of the only other issues is the third act does essentially become good versus bad, stop the bad guy, flip the switch kind of thing, which isn't inherently terrible. It's still entertaining, and it doesn't go on too long, and it still looks good, and it's still got some good action and suspense, but it does lose the depth or intrigue that the first two acts have. But the robot uprising in that third act is awesome. And that really, even though it's very blockbuster in nature, theoretically, it's not crazy to see that in some future that could happen if things were done the wrong way or things were ignored when it comes to AI. I'm also glad, actually, that it did not get a sequel. I don't know if that was in the works or not or planned, but I'm glad that it is just a self-contained story. They don't feel the need to go back and try and inject some sequel story. I like that it's its own thing, and that's it. So that one is a heavy 4 out of 5. Let's get to the second film, which is Her, from 2013. Written and directed by Spike Jonze, stars Joaquin Phoenix, Amy Adams, Scarlett Johansson, the voice of, Rooney Mara, Chris Pratt's in there, Olivia Wilde, and the synopsis is, In the near future, a lonely writer develops an unlikely relationship with an operating system designed to meet his every need. So if you caught, or if you've been a listener for a long time, when we did our best of the 2010s list or ranking, this was one of my maybe top 5, at least top 10. I've seen it maybe a half a dozen times or more, and even when I first saw it, it was around the time I was just getting serious about movies, I could not believe how great this one was. And I think it gets better every single time I watch it. It's one of the only movies that I've ever seen in my whole life that, especially on rewatch, I actually find myself drifting off because I'm thinking so deeply about all the things that they're bringing up. Relationships, about the future, just feelings, emotions in general, friendship, whatever, identity. The conversations mainly between Phoenix and Adams, and then Phoenix and Johansson, which that's the primary part of the movie, obviously, but they're so thoughtful, they're so intimate, they're so raw and deeply felt. I can't really think of any flaws at all with the film, aside from maybe certain parts towards the end go on maybe a little too long or gets slightly repetitive. Talking some specifics, though, for one, it has 5 of my favorite actors ever in this, and this was also when Joaquin Phoenix was bouncing back, his Phoenix Assance, whatever you want to call it. This is one of the big ones that really brought him back, and he also met Rooney Mara here, and they would go on to be married, and I think they have a kid now. The setup of this story, the concept, is really subtle and restrained in terms of it being a dystopian future, because everything looks fairly normal. Like, there's very little that's actually that futuristic, which that works because you can't really tell, okay, is this 5 years in the future? Is it 20 years? Whatever. It's nothing insanely far, I wouldn't think, but it's just enough to be different, a little mysterious and fresh, but it looks amazing. The cinematography, the costume design matched with that, like the lighting, and Joaquin Phoenix's really colorful attire, like the red shirts, really just pop. And honestly help, as cheesy as it sounds, help to feed into the emotional weight and through line of everything. Phoenix can't really meet anyone. The date he has with Olivia Wilde, which is a very good scene, it goes poorly, but not, at least to me, not to the fault of him. It's more so she's had bad luck, and she's, I guess, quick to turn people off or to reject them, so she's not hurt again. And then Amy Adams is with this very odd guy who doesn't really get her art or her passion, and is constantly trying to interject his ideas and overtake her rather than to listen to her, and then that also ends. When Phoenix first gets the OS system and meets Samantha, her voice, like Scarlett Johansson, I mean, I've always loved her, but this is definitely one of her best of all time. When you meet her, you're instantly, because it is just the voice, I was instantly engaged. It's so bright, so fun and charming, and couldn't wait to spend more time with her and hearing the questions that she would ask him. Even before she comes into the film and there's that automated voice asking Phoenix's character these generic questions, like, what's your relationship with your mother? And he starts going on about how his mother basically sucks. One moment within that also that feels very human is when the voice asks, do you want a female or a male voice? And then he takes a second to think. Because in that moment, I felt, yes, he is heterosexual, but you could see someone picking a male voice purely as maybe just having a friend rather than a romantic partner. So he's like, well, I guess I'll go with a woman. It's just their interactions and how that relationship, and Scarlett Johansson learning about life, or trying to, and becoming more and more self-aware. The moment, maybe third or so away into the film, when she asks him what marriage was like, because he was married to Rooney Mara, and there's that intercutting of the happy moments with Phoenix and Mara and then the sad moments, and he's talking about situations where he's playing back arguments in his head that he had, him mentioning the fact that both of you are growing together in your own way, but then him having hesitation, or possibly her as well, of growing without the other person, in whether it be professionally, personally, and that possibly causing resentment or a difference in that relationship moving forward. When he starts having fun with her and they go to the carnival or circus or whatever, and she leads him on, like, it's a pretty goofy scene, but it's nice to see someone who is depressed and lonely just letting go, and someone allowing him to do that. The gamer kid, I don't know if it's meant to be like an AI or if it's actually someone on the other end. I think it's AI, but the little doll player in the game that he's playing with his fingers, and that speaks so true to all of the online gameplay where you can just put on a headset and start cussing people out, and it could be a 12-year-old kid on the other side and just trashing people for the fun of it. The scene with Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara when they're signing the divorce papers and them asking each other how they are, and Phoenix revealing, "I'm dating an OS," and Rooney Mara being completely taken aback, as I feel like most people would. So what's great is I don't really fault her for criticizing him or for questioning that, because I feel like if I went through that and someone said, "I'm now dating an OS," in this day and age, I'd be like, oh, like, okay. And so I definitely would not be totally kosher with that, but him explaining to her what it's like, and because we know, having watched him, his emotions are as real as you can get. Joaquin Phoenix's job, which is letter writing, I think is so inventive, because it's something that in this day and age we have people writing thank you cards and happy birthday cards, that sort of thing. But if you think about it later on in the future, if it's not happening already, people in a very authentic way, as much as it could write thoughtful romantic letters to people, or friendship letters that you give someone all of your, some photos and information, and then they can write something very thoughtful that you might not otherwise have the eloquence to do. However, Phoenix realizes that it's other people's love that he's writing about, not his own, so that gets him down. Probably the weirdest scene in the movie, which it's meant to be, is the surrogate lover, when they hire this girl to be Scarlett Johansson's body, and they put Scarlett Johansson's, I guess, another Bluetooth system in the girl's ear, and then she wants Joaquin Phoenix to have sex with this girl while Johansson is speaking. Definitely makes you feel uncomfortable. It would be so weird if that actually happened to you, or at least I think most people would not be cool with it at first. I love when he goes to the cabin in the wintertime, or it's at least in the mountains where it's very snowy. Looks amazing, and the score is great. I didn't mention that yet. I love the piano tune that Scarlett Johansson or Samantha writes for him, and the ukulele tunes. Amy Adams's job, which is, I believe, is some sort of video game programmer. One of the funniest things in the whole film is when she shows Phoenix the video game that she's doing, and it's this single mother, single player. I don't even know what you would exactly describe it as, but you see this mom trying to make breakfast for her kids, getting in the carpool lane, like, it's hysterical stuff. And being around a lot of people who play games, I hear about the craziest, weirdest little one-offs. Not that there's anything wrong with that at all, but I hear about just the most random concepts for games that people love, and hey, that's cool. I think it's cool that you can make a game in some ways be so simple yet so addicting and enjoyable. What I love, though, in terms of the AI, let's bring it back to AI, of all the movies that I'm going to be talking about, this is the one that seems the closest to our near future, because there are already plenty of online dating and sex simulators, all these online chat rooms. There's apps where you can make your own little AI girlfriend or boyfriend. Like, it just goes on and on and on with the easy ways for people to create their own version of, a love life. Jumping to the end, the big reveal of Samantha or Scarlett Johansson's, let's call it cheating, when Joaquin Phoenix finds out that she's also the AI partner of, I think, thousands of other people, whether it's men and women, whoever. And the idea that really speaks to our current moment in time, when, going back to what I was saying about all the simulators and all the chat rooms and stuff, whether it's for gaming, for sex, for whatever, you don't know who you're really speaking to a lot of the time. Sometimes it's just words on a screen. You may not even see their faces. So that shock is not surprising at all, but I'm sure it's something with how people get catfished nowadays all the time. But despite the writing being a little schmaltzy, over the top, the final conversation with Scarlett Johansson and Joaquin Phoenix is very heartfelt. And that ending teaser when Joaquin Phoenix shows up at Amy Adams's apartment, and she's sad and lonely too because her AI left. However, at that point, they get to spend time with each other, as they should, because they obviously have feelings, and it does have that sweet ending. I do enjoy Chris Pratt a lot in this. He has a smaller role, but I think this was right before he broke out with Guardians, Jurassic World, so he was still the more comedic Chris Pratt that I love. So as I said, I would call it a masterpiece. Heavy 5 out of 5, 10 out of 5. Let's get to Transcendence, which came out in 2014. Directed by Wally Pfister. In his directorial debut, he's mainly a cinematographer who's worked for Christopher Nolan and done a lot of great films. Stars Johnny Depp, Rebecca Hall, Morgan Freeman, Cillian Murphy, Paul Bettany, Kate Mara. And the synopsis is: a scientist's drive for artificial intelligence takes on dangerous implications when his own consciousness is uploaded into one such program. So I saw this one in theaters, have seen it a few times since. It did not do very well. It flopped really hard. I think it had a budget of around $150 million, and it only made, I think, around 100 or less. So pretty big financial flop. Reviews were mainly mixed to negative, and was also one of Johnny Depp's last big movies. This is one that I wish it was a masterpiece. I always want to like it more than I do. I don't think it's nearly as bad as some people make it out to be. I still think it has way more interesting concepts and ideas than so many other blockbusters out there, and I'd rather have a film like this try and sometimes fail than just play it safe completely. So the overall concept is Johnny Depp's character is his renowned scientist, inventor kind of guy, Steve Jobs-esque, I guess you could say. And he is this front runner with AI progression and technology. And after giving this presentation at a school, a terrorist group who is anti-technology tries to kill him with this poison bullet, which you only find out till later that that's what's happened. In order to save him, his wife and friends upload his consciousness to this AI godlike system that he has invented, so that way he can live on. And the rest of the narrative is mainly him becoming more and more self-aware, becoming more and more powerful, and then everyone else realizing, oh my God, like what else could he do? Because he's stealing money from financial systems, he's breaking into places in terms of getting information, like really is a god figure. What's so frustrating is while I like Wally Pfister a lot as a cinematographer, and the movie looks amazing, for sure, I don't think that he was the right person to do this, nor was the writer, because while this is his story, he was a first-time writer, and so you're basically giving a standalone, non-IP blockbuster that has, again, $150 million investment or more to a first-time director and a first-time writer. Obviously, everyone needs to get their chance, their big break somehow, but this is pretty risky. I feel like the pre-production, the development of this one could have been handled better to where it could have been an amazing movie. Because while I can get past some goofy, overreaching concepts of sci-fi and, futuristic stuff and all that sort of thing, one of the biggest problems is that there are large stretches of this that are flat out dull. Not where I'm wanting to stop watching it, but there are points where I'm just thinking, man, this is just really lagging. How the film is directed as well, it feels very uninvolving. I feel like I'm always at a distance with everyone. I mean, no characters are written super deeply, but even with that, I'm never really feeling intimately connected with anyone, whether it's Johnny Depp or Cillian Murphy or Kate Mara, and all the motivations are quite threadbare. However, some good things, I really like the opening sequence of this film, where Johnny Depp is giving the presentation on stage, and you're seeing this intercutting of these seemingly harmless, normal actions, like, for example, someone bringing a birthday cake to a party, this team of lab office workers, doing their thing, and then suddenly it turns into a huge terrorist attack. And I think the poisoned cake is very creative. And while I like the idea and overall connection with this anti-technology terrorist group, the whole unplugged thing, like the guy has a tattoo that says unplug with a little cord running through it. It's a little too on the nose. Don't think we really needed that. And seems pretty stupid for someone in a terrorist group to have that. But I guess then again, there are plenty of people who do that. But I think just how obvious and kind of lazy that concept is. The look and design of Johnny Depp's character when they start to put him in the system, when he has all the blue wires and patches on his head, and the posters market that in a way. I love the look of the posters, just saying. But what the script fails to really communicate, in my opinion, is while yes, there are people in the world trying to take things over through themselves or through one company, that's, for the most part, that's still not really how technology works. Technology spreads more and more over time to where we're just using it more and more in our daily life. And before you know it, technology runs our life. Whereas one day, years ago, it didn't. It's really that ripple effect, as opposed to it just being just Steve Jobs, just Bill Gates. It's really more so the little guys spreading it day in and day out, tweaking it. And that's why the third act really fails what has come before in terms of not only becoming very goofy, way too blockbuster in nature without really warranting that style of storytelling, because I got from the end of the film, the way to destroy technology, the way to destroy this threat is make sure we have all the right people in power who won't pass these laws or let these things slide and or blow it up. And boom, everything is saved. The score is also very good. You get a good share of slow motion close-ups of water droplets falling from leaves. I don't know the exact. I know there might be some more commentary within that, but I think it's a little overused, that one image. Kate Mara has a interesting look in this, even though it's sort of gross. I think her weird, dirty, shaggled blonde hair is a somewhat memorable image. This is a film that I feel like I will continue to go back to every so often, and that's saying something because there are so many sci-fi films or films in other genres that are one and done for me. and I encourage people to check it out and spend a little bit more time thinking about it if you have that chance or that energy to. That is a heavy 3 out of 5. Let's get to Ex Machina, which technically came out in 2014, but I don't think it had a theatrical release until 2015. It is written and directed by Alex Garland, who just did Civil War. Stars Alicia Vikander, Donald Gleason, Oscar Isaac. That's about it for big names. And the synopsis is a young programmer is selected to participate in a groundbreaking experiment in synthetic intelligence by evaluating the human qualities of a highly advanced humanoid AI. Similar to Her, this would be the best of the group that I'm talking about in this collection and would easily be one of my favorite sci-fi films of the 2010s, maybe of all time, really. But it gets better every single time. It's one of those. I've seen it 5 or 6 times at least. One of the things that I love about it is that it has such a seemingly simple narrative structure and concept, but I feel like whether it's on the page or underlying ideas, it's so deep with those possibilities of AI, the good things, the bad things, the threats. Some strong marks. The idea, the writing for Oscar Isaac's character, which this is one of his bigger movies of the time, right when he was in Star Wars, I believe, is he's this billionaire tech startup guy who runs a Google-like company. He lives out in the middle of nowhere. He's fairly young, all considering. He makes a focus for, while he drinks and all these things, he makes a focus of talking about taking antioxidants and exercising, and he's this new wave, I feel like, of the sort of the Silicon Valley billionaire. But also at the same time, he's in some ways like a sociopath because he's so disconnected from everything. All he cares about is having power, having the control, psyching everybody out, and moving forward with what he believes to be the right technology. As he plays on the words of Donald Gleason's character, likes when people refer to him as a god. So like I just talked about with Transcendence, where maybe it's not explicitly stated that Johnny Depp wants to be God, people are accusing him of that, whereas in this, Oscar Isaac has no hesitation to be like, yeah, I like the sound of that. That's good. That's really what I am, obviously. Despite the film mainly just taking place at this house, you wouldn't really have guessed it that it was one location because there's so much variety in the look of the hallways, the rooms, the exterior shots where they go and take walks. It feels like every scene had some new sort of visual or interesting production design. This is also still, I would say, one of Alicia Vikander's biggest roles because she was in this and The Danish Girl. She's a fantastic actor and very underrated. I wish she would get back into more mainstream films because I feel like the last 4 or 5 years, ever since Tomb Raider, she's kind of fallen off. The stuff towards the end, just jumping towards the end for a little bit, when Donald Gleason is trying to help Ava escape because he's realized that Oscar Isaac has been, even though they're robots, they've been becoming so self-aware that they want to escape, that they realize that the treatment that Oscar Isaac is giving them is not right. And Ava is the latest version to not yet be destroyed, even though he has plans to do that. So then Donald Gleason is like, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to save you. When all that starts happening, Oscar Isaac, or you think at first, Donald Gleason is at an advantage. Then that morning that it's all supposed to go down, Oscar Isaac reveals, I'm on to you. You know this. Like, I have cameras here, this and that. You're through. But then there's yet another twist where actually Donald Gleason had done something prior that allowed him to maintain that advantage of trapping Oscar Isaac, theoretically, and helping Ava. And all of those are not in your face. They're not those twists where they become tiresome. They feel more than reasonable within the context of the story. They're not pretentious, they're not overwritten. And quickly, on that note, this is still, I think, Alex Garland's best movie, both writing and direction. The dance sequence with Oscar Isaac and his female robot assistant, who, I mean, you don't find out till later she's a robot, that's one that has really had a shelf life. I still see it referenced and parodied online and social media and GIFs and all that. Along with all the twists at the end, that's really where the visual style and the creativity of what AI robots could look like, both on the surface and underneath, and all that is brilliant. For example, one of my favorites is when you see the robot assistant of Oscar Isaac pulling down the piece of her artificial skin on her face, and you see the artificial eyeball and the metal, and it's this very stark, striking image that is, I mean, in some ways it really does turn into a horror film, because these robots suddenly get the upper hand. The few security measures that Oscar Isaac thought were uncrackable are turned off in one way or the other, and things go nuts. The scene in the hallway when Ava gets out and the robot assistant shows up, Oscar Isaac is, of course, freaking out when Ava turns to him and he's trying to say, all right, go back in your room, get out of here, listen to me. Obviously, she's so advanced, she's making that decision for herself. And there's that great momentum of that wide, deep focus shot of her slowly gaining speed, running at him, and then finally she jumps at him and knocks him to the ground. Maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like one aspect of the music that really helps the suspense build is it starts off very quiet, and I feel like it builds more and more and more over time until the third act has really in-your-face, bombastic, edgy electronic sounds that create that overwhelming climax. The final epilogue, when Ava gets out, she looks like a normal person because she's stolen the skin off of the past versions of her. Then she gets on the helicopter, and that final shot looks so good. I think it's the camera turned upside down and shoots down on a city street sidewalk or patio something, and there are all these shadows of silhouettes of people walking by this way and that, and then you see her silhouette as a normal person, and then she walks off. The scene when Domhnall Gleeson is starting to become a little bit more aware or suspicious of Oscar Isaac's intentions and how the lottery thing was a total jip, he asks Oscar Isaac, did you base the look of Ava on my pornography profile? He's obviously attracted to her, and then we find out that Oscar Isaac has been hacking his computer to find out, are you a decent person? What are your interests? Do you have family? Are there any risks of bringing you to my secret compound? And one thing that is very, if you think about it realistically, what's going to keep someone more, as shallow as it might be, keeping someone more focused on a experiment like this is having that test subject be attractive to them specifically. So I feel like as gross as that is, that's really smart. When you see the old footage that Domhnall Gleeson is going through of the past robots, and they're smashing at the window or the glass doors to try and get out, and then Ava gets revenge on everybody, even Domhnall Gleeson, who is trying to help her. She's like, screw you, I'm out of here. Now my creator can be dead, and you can know what it feels like to be trapped yourself. So good luck. Which sucks because you don't see Domhnall Gleeson, at least I didn't, as a bad guy in particular. He's fairly innocent in all this, but then AI doesn't really discriminate. If you're going against me, you're going to get burned. Yeah, it is still an amazing movie to me. I think everyone should watch it. I feel like it's not so sci-fi or so one thing that it would turn really anyone off. That is a heavy, heavy 5 out of 5. Let's get to Ghost in the Shell, the live-action film, which came out in 2017. Directed by Rupert Sanders, stars Scarlett Johansson, Paolo Asbeck, Takashi Kitano, Juliette Binoche, Michael Pitt. And the synopsis is, in the near future, Major Myra Killian is the first of her kind, a human saved from a terrible crash who is cyber-enhanced to be a perfect soldier devoted to stopping the world's most dangerous criminals. I'm not a big anime fan. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but there's just something about a lot of the shows, especially that I have trouble really getting invested in. So I don't have a deep knowledge of that aside from what I hear from friends and coworkers. But Ghost in the Shell just seems to be the one that has always interested me the most, and I've watched, I think, all the movies and then some of the shows. So when it was announced, this movie, I was very excited. Rupert Sanders had just done Snow White and the Huntsman, and he just did The Crow most recently, which I've not seen yet, but I really like Snow White and the Huntsman, and I enjoy this one a fair bit as well. First off, the movie looks amazing. Rupert Sanders just has a great eye, which really connects with me. I'm not sure exactly the reason even, but I think all of his movies look fantastic. He can do the darker gothic stuff like Snow White, and then he can do the very colorful ones like Ghost in the Shell. By far the biggest strength is Scarlett Johansson. I understand that the whole whitewashing thing, it's not great. But obviously, speaking about it realistically, this is a $150 million Hollywood film, give or take. So, end of the day, you're having to cast people who are giving this one more of a chance purely from a financial level. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. Hollywood is always going to do that. Everything from her physicality to walking very robotic-like, that easily could have become very goofy and taken you out of it. But while it's noticeable how she walks and how she moves her arms and, going left, right, that sort of thing, I think it's as authentic as it could be. What sort of makes the movie suffer, talking negatives for a minute, I don't mind, in theory, I like that it is only about 100 minutes. It's a tight, linear, no-nonsense narrative. But I feel like if you're doing a live-action film of this huge world, maybe even make it 2 hours, because there's so many ideas going on in this that, as opposed to, let's say, Blade Runner 2049, where that one is almost 3 hours, maybe too long, for some people at least, they spent the time to really talk and explore the concepts that they were bringing up. I don't know if they just had to devote all the money to those visuals or to Scarlett Johansson. I don't know, but I feel like that part of the movie makes it feel much more shallow. Like it's never going to be to the lengths or the heights of Blade Runner or some of the other, or like Her or Ex Machina. Like it's not going to be, to me, it's never going to be a 5 out of 5 film, which is okay. Casting otherwise, though, I know some people don't like it. Aside from, if we're putting aside the whitewashing thing for a second, one of my favorite parts, aside from Johansson, is Michael Pitt as Kuze, the villain. The scene when Major and Kuze first meet, when he traps her in that cybernetic cave, and we first get a glimpse at him, that character design, that performance, that sound work is amazing to me. The look of the body where some parts are exposed and you see the wires, the long hair, the glitchy, stuttery speech. And then, even though it doesn't go as deep as it could, the motivation of him being someone who was experimented on and then thrown away, is a very good human motivation to somewhat relate to him. Because you can only imagine what it would be like for you, and obviously you would be angry. Maybe, yeah, you shouldn't become a terrorist, but having his anger and that frustration and that severe trauma and wanting to have revenge on all those people, that does make sense for someone in his position. The opening credit design or sequence is very impressive and very much calls back to the original movie. The action sequence that starts with Kuze hacking the garbage men, I love that it doesn't feel the need to explain that. It just shows, all right, these people are hacked. Let's move forward. The interrogation of that garbage man when he's in that glass cell and Major comes in, then suddenly Kuze hacks the guy and starts speaking through him, and it's a very unnerving, unsettling visual and sound design yet again. Now, got to talk about the whitewashing stuff more in depth. So, from what I get from the movie, or how they tried to explain it, is Major was not originally a white person, but then when Major was severely injured and disfigured, they replaced her with what would be the body or face of Scarlett Johansson. And so it's not like saying you were a white person living in Asia. It was, this is the body that we had, and therefore she has a mother that is not Caucasian. I think if you're going to do it one way, I guess that's a way to do it that obviously people were still very offended by it, and I'm not going to say that's a good way to do it, because it's, end of the day, it's whitewashing. The score is very solid by Clint Mansell and Lauren Balfe, two great composers. The third act, because of the runtime, it does feel short. Too short, even. I don't find that the actual pacing of that scene feels rushed, but especially when I saw it for the first time in theaters, I was thinking, wait, it's already over? Like, that's it? Because the action sequence is good. I like that final sequence with that big robot that is in the original one as well, and there's the moment that she is pulling on the top of the robot and her fake skin is tearing in the wires, and that still looks great, both in this one and the anime. The ambush on Aramaki, the leader of Major, or the boss, that's a very visceral part of the film when the shooters have those black masks on, but then he ends up taking them all down. Overall, it's one of the better, more mainstream sci-fi films of the last 7 or 8 years. I can go back to it. It's always entertaining. It's always insightful. So that's a win for me. That is a heavy 4 out of 5. Let's get to Alita Battle Angel, which came out in 2019. Is directed by Robert Rodriguez, as well as written and produced by James Cameron. Stars Rosa Salazar, Christoph Waltz, Jennifer Connelly, Mahershala Ali, Ed Skrein, Jackie Earle Haley. And the synopsis is, a deactivated cyborg's revived, but can't remember anything of her past and goes on a quest to find out who she is. Well, when this one came out, I didn't know anything about it in terms of the manga that it's based on. All I know is that it was done by Rodriguez, who has done Desperado, Sin City, Spy Kids, and then being produced by Cameron. This was also my only second time watching it. I don't think I had watched it since the theater. I like it overall. It's at about the same level that I remember the first time. If I had to choose between this and Ghost in the Shell, which there are a lot of obvious similarities between the two, I would choose Ghost in the Shell. Which I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but the actress Rosa Salazar, which this was really her big break, she is perfect in this. That was spot on casting. I know some people, when it came out, maybe even still don't love the animation of her face, or really of her whole body, but with the big eyes, like bug eyes, that stuff to me, I don't mind at all. I think it works. I think it still looks great. Talking design-wise, whereas Ghost in the Shell, Major had fully artificial skin over her whole body, so she looked at least fairly human. Whereas in this, Alita, she only has her shoulders up with skin. The setup where she's found in this scrapyard, and Christoph Waltz is a technological, scientist doctor who helps, I guess, put people back together in a way. I like that storyline, and that also calls back to Ghost in the Shell, with Major having this parental figure being the female doctor, Juliette Binoche, and then Alita has Christoph Waltz. Robert Rodriguez is a filmmaker who I typically follow. I don't think I've seen every one of his films. I saw his most recent one, which was Hypnotic, and I did do that on the show, and that was truly terrible, so I'm hoping that he gets back to films like this. But combining his style as well as James Cameron is a very interesting choice, and I would be up for them working together more. I think it has more James Cameron than it does Rodriguez, but with Rodriguez, you get in this movie the more cultural inclusion, and where they're setting the story, language, and also a very crazy visual style. And then you get some trademark James Cameron isms, like the good and evil. Evil has the power over everything, and then the good people are the people on the ground who are struggling, and there's that conflict, as well as almost like a Romeo and Juliet, which you can see in the majority of his films, like Titanic would be the most obvious, Avatar. Touching on some issues real quick, the biggest problem by far with this movie, and I noticed it the first time, and that's what largely brings the star rating down, is the romance. For one, the main guy in this, the boy, is miscast. I don't blame him totally, because the writing for him is very clunky, and it's all this cheesy dialogue to try and charm her. But not only that, for whatever reason, he does not seem to fit into the context of this world. He does not blend in, whereas everyone else does in their own role. I feel like he is someone who looks like an actor. He could have just stepped off a CW show set or something. Not to be too mean, because his performance is fine. It's not offensively bad, but I was always taken out of it. I did not care about this guy. The romance is maybe half of the movie or more. The chemistry is not there. It bloats the runtime to 2 hours, which isn't that long, but I think it easily could have lost 15, 20 minutes and been closer to the Ghost in the Shell runtime, but for the better. Because whenever it cuts back to that, I just feel disengaged. I want to get back to not necessarily the plot, but just that world building, and I want to get back to Alita's narrative. On top of that, by the end, it seems like her motivation to do all these things that are going on is for the boy. That's not inherently bad, but it almost starts to feel like a Twilight romance or something, because I want to see Alita, who at many points in the story, especially the beginning, is this very strong, powerful, yet vulnerable or impressionable kid who really wants to make her own way, rediscover her life, and this boy does not need to be there in order to achieve that. The group led by Ed Skrein, or I guess that's his little gang, the look of Jackie Earle Haley's robot, which is this huge lumbering figure, then the girl who, she's only in it for a few minutes, but the girl with a red hood who has a torso that doesn't have any artificial skin or anything. It's only metal, and she has almost animal-like claws. In that same fight towards the beginning, actually, there's one more who, he almost looks like a demented sci-fi version of Chucky, but in the best way. So they have a really good ability, and I think that seems more like James Cameron by having these really grotesque, dark, almost horror-like imagery when it comes to the robots, and that definitely is reminiscent of Terminator and Aliens and other things. One of the big standout scenes, which is the popular one from what I gather, and it's my favorite scene in the movie, and there are a couple actually, is the motorball games or the arena. It's just pure, ridiculous, fun sci-fi. It has very little to do with the plot, aside from maybe towards the end. And it would be hard for anyone, I would think, to not get at least some enjoyment out of it. And one more thing about her performance, she not only has the physique and the physicality of everything, but her charisma and energy, not only just her emotional range, it's all very contagious, because when she's discovering something like chocolate or oranges or motorball, whatever, when she's excited, you're excited. So you get much more, at least I did, much more invested in her arc and her journey. The score by Junkie XL is solid, always a great composer. I feel like it's not ever going to be one that is going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. It's very worth watching for sure, and I am sad that it did not do that well at the box office, because I would happily watch an Alita Battle Angel 2 or Ghost in the Shell 2 over, I don't know, Fast and Furious 11. That is a heavy 3.5 out of 5. Let's get to the last movie of this AI collection, which is Finch. Came out in 2021 and is a Apple TV Plus exclusive or original film. It is directed by Miguel Sapochnik, stars Tom Hanks, Caleb Landry Jones, and the synopsis is: on a post-apocalyptic Earth, a robot built to protect the life of his creator's beloved dog learns about life, love, friendship, and what it means to be human. So I saw this one for the first time maybe a year ago. I had heard about it for a while, just didn't get around to watching it until way after it came out. I was like, okay, cool, it's a Tom Hanks movie, it's sci-fi, I like Apple TV Plus films typically, so I'm curious. I ended up liking it way more than I thought I would. Of all the films that I've talked about in this group, while films like Her are definitely emotional, this is the only one, and honestly the only film that I can think of in a long, long time that actually makes me tear up. Going in the first time, I didn't realize that it was produced by Amblin Entertainment, which is Steven Spielberg's company, or one of, because I was going to say first thing, this feels very Steven Spielberg, but in the best way. It's also produced by Robert Zemeckis of Back to the Future fame, of course. I didn't know much at all about the story itself. It is very simple, but effectively so. It is this guy in a post-apocalyptic world, as the synopsis says, who is dying from some sort of disease or maybe cancer, something like that. I don't think it's ever specified, but it's mainly due to the exposure to all the UV radiation that the Earth has gotten super hot, and he is just slowly declining. He has this beloved dog who is his only friend and partner, and he has spent all this time designing a robot to take care of the dog after he dies, because he knows that he's going to die. That, right out of the gate, is a win for me. Like, that gets me interested, because for one, I love dogs. Dogs have been a saving grace, a lifesaver for me throughout my whole life, and I think they will continue to be, as they are for many. And so typically whenever there's a dog involved in a film like this, I'm usually invested more than maybe the average person would be. Talking about the Spielberg-isms, which it's not only dealing with sci-fi, but it has this dysfunctional family of sorts, this ragtag team of friends who are more like family, and then the main point of the road trip is to go hopefully find Tom Hanks's father in San Francisco, and so you have the absent father there. Honestly, a coming-of-age film for the robot, because he's teaching the robot how to navigate life, how to drive, how to throw the ball for the dog, play fetch. And it has a very genuine playfulness to it. The humor is very childlike, and all the characters are very earnest and restrained and down to earth. Also, another thing that I was really relieved about is that this movie only touches on the human conflict in terms of, it's almost like the Walking Dead slogan, fight the dead, fear the living. This very refreshingly that's a very minor little moment in the film. One of which is Tom Hanks talking about how he came across the dog, and then there's the scene when they go into this abandoned skyscraper or mall or something, and they make a lot of noise thanks to the Jeff the robot not thinking, and this car follows them. But I'm so glad that that's all it was. With this film, you get more than enough drama and conflict purely through a survival narrative, and then also the emotional ups and downs with these three characters. I know also that some critics, maybe some audiences, pointed out the uninspired nature of the world, like the post-apocalyptic world, but for me, I guess in a sense I get that, but at the same time, it was obvious to me that's not the point at all of this narrative. You could have technically put these three characters in another context, in another time, and it still would have been mostly the same movie. It looks great, for one thing, even though it's all desert, it's all just sand and dust blowing. I think it's really well shot. And there's a lot of great natural light. Like, even when the movie starts and you're watching Tom Hanks walk through this dust storm, and then when he's rummaging through these dark rooms, but there's still a lot of very striking light sources that make the whole thing look much prettier than it would normally need to be, or that it has to be. This is also one of Tom Hanks's best performances in a long time. I don't think he's ever given a bad one, but this is definitely one of his more nuanced and emotionally gripping. Some other enjoyable, charming scenes is the one with Tom Hanks showing Jeff the popcorn popping on the pan or whatever it is. The tornado, that's another not funny scene, but very suspenseful and well shot, when they're having to nail down the spikes to keep the RV or the trailer on the ground, and then they have to rush inside. The tornado comes through and knocks every single spike off except for one. Jumping towards the end real quick, the final 15 minutes of this movie are so touching and poignant. It really puts you in that situation if you were Tom Hanks and you knew you were on your last leg and you just wanted to throw the ball for your dog one more time, and you saw your son of sorts learning, and you knew that things were going to be okay. Not only that, but probably the most heart-wrenching moment is when Tom Hanks does eventually die in the trailer, and the dog wakes up and notices it, and you hear his howls of sorrow from outside because Jeff is sitting outside, and you just hear that awful whine of the dog knowing that his owner has died. So the score is excellent. It's by the composer of The Last of Us, the games, part 1 and 2. So very, very good score. I think I've said that every single time I've reviewed in this collection, but whatever. Besides Tom Hanks, Caleb Landry Jones as Jeff the Robot, that performance, I wish he could have gotten more praise, because I've really liked what he's done. I haven't seen all of his works, but typically when I see him in a movie, there's always something interesting that he does. And this is, I would say, my favorite performance of his to date, and the sound design of his voice is very strong as well. So could not say enough about this one. You got to see it. That one is a heavy 4.5 out of 5. All right, well, that is about it for the show. Again, rate, review, subscribe, like, follow, watch, all that stuff. Share with your friends. We have plenty, as always, we have plenty of great content coming your way soon, so keep an eye out for all that. And hope you enjoyed it even half as much as I did, and I'll see you next time, y'all.